Welcome back to the Trusted Visions podcast series. While we begin a new month and a new topic, I wanted to first take a minute and just thank everybody that has been viewing our podcast and hope that you find these podcasts to be enjoyable and educational. The purpose of us doing these podcasts are to bring information to you that brings benefit and value to your practice and your OSJ group. So if there's ever any topic that you want us to cover, feel free to comment on our LinkedIn page. Feel free to send us that topic at info@trustedvisions.com, and we'll make sure to cover that topic. We'll welcome back David this week. He was out sick last week. We won't hold it against him, as you can see the Kansas City Chiefs polo there. Everybody's going to have their own team, so we won't hold it against you, David, but welcome back. This month starts a new topic, which I know is extremely important. We have all dealt with thousands of OSJs and enterprises that say, I want to become a recruiting OSJ or enterprise. And what we found is there's very few that are successful in building a recruiting OSJ or enterprise. So this month's topic is how to build a successful recruiting OSJ or enterprise. Today's topic is going to cover how do you even know whether you can be a successful recruiting OSJ or enterprise and things to consider. So we're going to go through a variety of different topics throughout the month, but today's is going to start with how do you even know whether you can be a successful recruiting OSJ? So I'm going to kick this off and then I'll ping it over to you, David, is I think one of the first things that you really have to consider, and we've all seen this, every broker dealer treats recruiting OSJs or enterprises differently. Some broker dealers will have geographical restrictions of where you can grow based off of where you're located. Some broker dealers will have restrictions on you have to have an advisor that has X minimum production requirement for the advisor. So that's where I really think you have to start, and you have to get into the weeds with your broker dealer, or if you're considering a broker dealer change, that should be part of your due diligence process, because that can hamstring your growth if you're not really looking at your growth plan versus the broker dealer's thoughts on your growth plan. So with that, I'm going to ping it over to you, David. Anything to add on that? And then other things to think about of whether you can be a successful OSJ or not.
Absolutely, because I think the key on top of that, Jeremy, is the recruiting side of it. Making sure that your broker dealer is going to be supportive when it comes to the recruiting of advisors and building that branch. A lot of them have a lot of concepts, ideas out there, so you can leverage a lot of the talents at your broker dealer partners to help you get that done. So it's always take a look at the resources that they provide and make sure that you're not running into roadblocks. I think in a lot of cases, there's enough work in trying to build your own OSJ and recruiting branch. You don't want to run into any obstacles along the way. So knowing those obstacles are there, sometimes you can overcome some of the small ones, but you have to also make sure that you're prepared. And kind of going to the other subject to kind of talking about, really what's your value proposition? Because I think that's key. When you look at what your value proposition is, people look at that and go, oh my God, I have to have a huge marketing plan. I've got to have brochures. I've got to have all this rigmarole to basically advertise that I'm going to be recruiting OSJ and all the value that I bring. But you really got to take it back and really oversimplify it. You're a successful advisor. You wouldn't be looking at building a branch if you were not already a successful advisor. So take a look at your growing pains, how you started as an advisor. What work did you put in to come up with your elevator speech? You can utilize that same simple process of looking at what your strengths are. What are your strengths that you promote to your clients on a day in and day out basis? What are the strengths have you developed over the years? A lot of the times those same strengths and everything that you provide as far as a value to your client can be reiterated or basically change the audience to you as another advisor. What would you want to hear? And you basically take a lot of the basic sides of that and come up with a basic value proposition you can mold. Doesn't have to be 14 paragraphs. It doesn't have to be a page. It can be a couple of sentences to start with. And I know I'll kind of turn it over to Deb, because I know Deb's got a lot of experience on that too, of kind of taking a look at your value proposition. And where do you start and how do you get there?
Thanks, David and Jeremy. I love this topic. And, in working with OSJs and branches over the years, a long time ago, I started talking to them about, if you want to recruit, and it is a very, very competitive environment, right? And number one, as Jeremy said, you got to have the buy-in from your broker dealer, right? And have everybody on the same page. But for me, the start really is, there's a couple questions. Why should I join your firm? And I think in order to really articulate that, that's where you start with the value proposition, right? And so some of the things, and it has to be, you've got to make it compelling. So there's a couple of key pieces that I always like, to talk about. It's really got to be compelling to that advisor. And I just lost my train of thought, guys, sorry. But here's a couple of things that I say to start with. Think about how, when you're putting this together, who you are, right? Your biography, successes, your community interests, what you do, what's the main focus, right, of your business, markets, deliverables, niches. Why do you do what you do? Other than making money, what drives you? Who have you done it for before? So give some success stories. And this is all kind of things that I would tell an advisor to put into their value proposition. What makes you different from every other financial advisory firm, right? So have to be able to articulate what sets you apart from other firms. And then why should I join your firm, right? And then that kind of gets into some other things. But for me, if you can start and answer those questions and put together a value proposition, then that helps you lead into, maybe the next piece, which is why should I join you?
Yeah, and that's a great point. I think, and I've had a couple of these scenarios over the last couple of weeks we've discussed is, an advisor coming out of a wirehouse. And the conversation I had with him was going to this enterprise, yes, you're giving up 3, 4, 5% payout wise. But, and I asked him to answer this question, is it worth having that added layer of support that helps you navigate an entirely different world, being independent, understanding technology, there to support you when it comes to lease negotiations, when it comes to, any legalities coming from a wirehouse, is that worth it? And his answer was absolutely. And so when David, you and Deb talk about value prop, I think it's vital for an OSJ or a branch manager to be able to clearly define that value prop. Because what I've always said is that you as an OSJ, you could take whatever override you want. I don't care if it's 5%, 20%, 40%, but you have to be able to justify that haircut or that override you're taking on that advisor. And it could be turnkey office space. It could be,
Right.
It could be support staff, it could be technology, whatever, but you have to be able to justify it. And in my opinion, that's where a lot of OSJs or enterprises get in trouble, is they start with this grid and they just pull the grid out of the air and say, if you're doing 50,000, I'm going to put you at 60%. If you're doing 100,000, I'm going to put you at 70%. Well, how do you justify that? And you can justify it however you want, but if you're not competitive on the payout side, how are you going to justify why you're not competitive? And that's where I think a lot of people get in trouble. Any thoughts on that, Deb, first, and then David?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that goes back to, and David mentioned one of the things, you've got to have a strong marketing program. Maybe that's one of your things that you can provide, right? You've got to provide something. Is it office space? Is it support staff? Is it a strong marketing program in place? And that, not just a marketing program, but really something that can drive business, right? We all talk to advisors all the time. And what a lot of times are they looking for? They want new clients, right? So they're looking for something that can really help drive that to them. Maybe it is a succession plan, right? Maybe it's the opportunity to have ownership in the firm. Those are key things that, again, separates you and adds value to what you're providing to that advisor as an OSJ. I mean, I try and think things through, because with so many firms now, what's different than we started doing this, and you gentlemen may disagree with me, but there's a lot of broker dealers that aren't allowing advisors to do the supervision piece, right? So even if they come on and they join their branch, it's more about, let's join building a collaborative team, where they can feel like they're really a part of something, and they can, access advisors that have a lot more experience that they can, or again, go into the marketing programs, et cetera. But there's not, if you're not taking and doing that actual supervision, like a lot of firms aren't allowing reps to do anymore, then that adds a little more pressure, right? To really come up with something that's going to justify what you're going to take. And that's just a few things. And David probably has, some other things to add to that.
Well, absolutely. I think you guys hit the nail on the head. And it comes down to, having a plan and have a structured plan is great, but just as important, you have to have flexibility. No different than when you're sitting down with a client at, figuring out what their needs are. Every single advisor that you're recruiting to the branch, unless you just wanted to look for a particular advisor that fits your particular mold, and that's the only thing that you want, and that pretty much, narrows your market space on building your branch. If that's a goal you want, you have to define that up front. I'm only going to recruit people that fit the mold that I'm trying to build. If not, you do have to build in flexibility. You're going to have the availability to sit down with an advisor, find out what their needs are. Is it branch? Is it space? Is having a place to go meet with their clients that important to them? Is there technology? Is there support? Is there marketing? Or economies of scale of being able to offer some products, services, or tools that they utilize on a day-to-day basis, that if they could get that tool a little bit cheaper, they would join your branch in a heartbeat. Payouts, we all know, as Jeremy hit the nail on the head, is payouts are the most important. If the payout justifies what you're giving them as far as the value, then you can absolutely do it. You could be taking 40% if you're giving them the whole kit and caboodle and getting them down a successful path to build their own practice, then great. But a lot of recruiting OSJ branches don't have the capability, aren't quite there yet. So you have to have flexibility, sit down, listen to the advisor. Having a value proposition is very important, but having the flexibility to be able to bring an advisor in for what fits their individual needs will help you build a branch faster, stronger, and with a lot more unique attitudes, and in a lot of cases, a lot more unique practices. That's something to consider.
Yeah, and I guess one topic you brought up, Deb, which I would love to get your guys' opinion is, some broker dealers, as you put it, Deb, will allow the OSJ to do the supervision. And I think there's pros and cons to both sides of it. Some broker dealers say, hey, outsource that to us. And, we work with several OSJs that have those two different models. What is your opinion, David, of which one's better than the other? As it pertains to OSJ allowing having home office supervision versus doing the supervision themselves. And I mean, what are things that OSJs or branch managers should consider when exploring broker dealers on those two paths?
Absolutely. And it's where your strengths are. We've worked with a lot of different branches where a lot of their strength is supervising advisors, and they've been doing it for decades. Some have never even taken a step back and say, hey, this is something I've always done. I will continue to do it, but it's not something they really truly enjoy. It's another opportunity when you're looking through at your current broker dealer partner, or if you're exploring an option of another broker dealer partner, is that something you want to do? Because in a lot of cases with the supervision, if you can take that off your plate, that's going to allow you to do a lot more when it comes to marketing to your clients, spending more time with your advisors, spending more time with your clients. I think it adds a whole nother level of service that you can provide, other than just dealing with the supervision of that overall advisor. So again, it's your attitude, your aptitude, and your time commitment. And that's the difficulty that comes along with it. And what I tell a lot of branches out there, most of them have been successful if they're doing the supervision. Usually it's a subset of their branch. They're not doing, if you've got somebody that's involved with new business development, somebody involved with marketing, hopefully in a lot of cases, that's not the same person that's dealing with the supervision side of it, because it does become difficult, and it basically hinders the other side of your business if you're not growing and you're spending most of your time on the supervision. So it can be a very much a personal preference, or something to absolutely evaluate whether you want to do that going forward, or if that's something you even have the taste for.
Yep.
Yeah.
Deb, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, first of all, I completely agree. And I think and a big key is also, let's look at the compliance risk, right? So there's always been kind of that back and forth as if you are actually supervising an advisor that you're taking an override on, right? I mean, isn't there a conflict there? And what I've seen over the past 10 years is that actually the advisors don't mind getting that piece taken away from them, right? Because it is a risk and it is taking, as David said, it takes their time away from doing what they do, right? I mean, they're in business to gather assets and to make new clients, not to be signing off on business. Now, true, some may hire someone, and that's a way to get out of that conflict so that you as an advisor or the head of the branch isn't actually signing off on somebody's business, and then you're also getting that override off of them. So that is something, but I definitely think the way to go is to have those firms that will just allow you to, again, rather than maybe call yourself an OSJ, a recruiting branch, an enterprise, to be looking yourself as a team, as a collaborative team. And I'm sure that's a whole nother topic, Chairman, that, but that's kind of my take on that.
Yeah, and I mean, in closing here, I think for a recruiting OSJ, and I'll bring up one that we worked with late last year. His most important factor for finding a new broker dealer was to secure the best payouts and pricing long term for his advisors, more so than any upfront money. And I think as an OSJ or enterprise, you've got to think 3 steps ahead of, if I'm going to make a move, where do I want to go with this move? And do I want to build a recruiting OSJ out with this new firm? And if so, take that into consideration when it comes to payouts and pricing. And because those advisors, part of your value prop is, hey, you as a sole advisor can take advantage of our payouts and pricing given the larger entity. So I think that's important. This is a really fun topic. I love the recruiting OSJ and enterprise topic. We got a lot to dig into this month. I will say, and this isn't something or the part of the podcast, we at Trusted Visions understand and have the experience working with recruiting OSJs and enterprises, hence why we've built out customized consulting packages for recruiting OSJs and enterprises when it comes to evaluating your value proposition. Clearly define your value proposition, how to build that out with the infrastructure in place, how to build relationships with the business development team with your broker dealer. If that's something of interest to you, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We hope that you enjoyed this podcast. David, we hope that the Chiefs can do it this week, by all means. If not, you might be a little grumpy on next week's podcast, but it is what it is. Team, thank you for everything. I hope everybody enjoyed this podcast this week.
Very much.